Invest in you. You who are rooted in the rich soil of cultura, familia. Our gente know that financial literacy equals legacy, accessibility, growing pathways of knowledge, impacting schools, building credit, home ownership, small businesses. Invierte en nosotros. Our future depends on it. Generations unfurling, a reaching, thriving tree, rising towards a hopeful sun. Levántate, gente. Invest in you.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Sharon Epperson, CNBC Senior Personal Finance Correspondent. It is Hispanic Heritage Month, and today we're looking at the state of financial education, what it means for the Hispanic American community and for everyone, what impact it will have on equity and on empowerment of generations in the future. We are joined today by the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, and he will be here to speak with us about his take on financial education and also answer questions, your questions from students, teachers, from nonprofit leaders and community organizers, and they will share their experience and get to ask a question directly to the Secretary. And then we also have an amazing panel of thought leaders and experts to talk about financial education, personal finance, where it stands today, and what it means for financial empowerment of all Americans. So thank you all for joining us, and let's get started. Secretary Cardona, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here with you.
You know, you are, of course, a lifelong educator. You grew up in the public schools. Your parents came here from Puerto Rico. You grew up in a housing project in Meriden, Connecticut. Yes. And then you went to the schools there and taught there, too. But you've said that, you know, many people out there, and in fact, the data does not really suggest that Latino children will actually become the next principal of a school. But you did that too. At 28 years old, you were the youngest principal in the state of Connecticut. And then in 2019, right before the pandemic, just months before, you became the educational commissioner in Connecticut. And now you are the U.S. Education Secretary. So my question to you, going back a couple of years, if you had to go back to your high school days, what is the class, based on your life experience, your work experience, that you wish you'd had that you didn't have? And would personal finance be on that list at all?
Well, thank you. You know, and first of all, it's more than a couple years, maybe a couple decades. But, you know, I think, yes, you know, and when I talk to students, when I talk to college students now, they talk about the need for financial literacy learning in a practical sense, how to look at debt, and how to plan for a financially secure future. These are all things that we should be thinking about as we move forward in this next chapter post-pandemic. I mean, I don't have to tell you the impact of the pandemic on communities of color, and in particular Latinos, who faced an 18.9% unemployment rate in April of 2020, being the highest unemployment rate of any other group. So we do owe it to our students to make sure that as we're thinking about courses in our high schools, even in our middle schools and in college for sure, we have to embed in there some financial literacy that's very practical to help these students continue to plan for their lives.
Yeah, you talked about personal finance and financial education, and that's really at the crux of what we're talking about today. And when you look at the statistics out there, it's not an understatement to say that many Americans feel like they have a lack of knowledge about their finances. A majority have less than 3 months worth of expenses saved. About a quarter have no emergency fund. And when Americans just rate themselves on how they're doing in terms of their personal finances, earlier this year, more than half said they're only doing fair or poor. And that number is even higher when you're looking at Latinos in the Hispanic community. So there are many Americans out there, including many that are joining us today, that are worried. And Barbara Angicola Manzoli is one of them. She is a military mom. She's also a teacher at Lewis Mills High School. And we thank you so much, Barbara, for being here, for your son's service, for all of the years that you have been working as an educator there. And what is your question for the Secretary?
Secretary Cardona, I am a proud business teacher from the state of Connecticut, a state that I know you are very familiar with. Teachers are preparing students to go out into the workforce, join the military, go to college, tech school, maybe even being an entrepreneur. But are we preparing them to have a solid foundation in their financial lives? Not everybody, and not yet. We all know that not having financial knowledge can lead to years of debt and missed opportunities with our money. My question for you is, how long are we going to have to wait until our country has a wake-up call and we actually prepare our students for the world that they are entering?
Absolutely, Barbara. Secretary Cardona, what do you say?
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for your service, and thank you to your son for his service. You're right over there at Lewis Mills. So, as you know, states and local boards control the curriculum, and what we're trying to do is really promote financial literacy instruction at early levels. We can't wait for a personal finance course in high school. You know this as a business teacher, right. You know this. We need to start thinking about how when we're talking about, when we're teaching students at the elementary level around math concepts, and we need to infuse it more naturally so that by the time they get to high school, there's a better understanding of it. And I have to say, in Connecticut, the legislature has been really forward thinking about this. And so has the treasurer, Sean Wooden, has been very forward thinking about how to infuse this earlier. And I would encourage, especially business teachers who know this better than anyone else, how do we think about strategies at the local and at the state level to encourage earlier instruction of it and a more embedded instruction versus an elective in high school that, as you know, as a business teacher, students are not sure if they want to take it because they have so many other electives, and because maybe they're trying to get a higher GPA, they're going to go for AP courses that may not offer financial literacy. Now we're talking about the issue, right? How are we having those conversations in our school improvement plans, in our district improvement plans, and in our state conversations to make sure that all students across the country, not only in Connecticut, have access to it earlier?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you for your question. And Secretary, Barbara brings up a very good point that when you talk about financial education, it absolutely has an impact on financial lives of adults down the road. If you look at studies that say, looking at kindergarten through 12 education and seeing when they are learning about personal finance, what the impact there is on them, looking at scholarships or grants when they go to college, having a better understanding of debt. In fact, there's one report out there that says that students who have had financial education have a private student loan balance that is about $1,300 less than what the average may be. So it does make a difference. And of course, your department has taken great strides to really help students that are underwater here with student loans and the pause on the pandemic pause, on federal student loans. That will end, though, at the end of January of 2022. And there's still 40 million Americans, more than 40 million Americans, with a total of $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. And so we have someone today who has a question for you. Cassandra Shorter is in Texas. She's one of millions of Americans who says she's been struggling with student loan debt for many years. And Cassandra, bring you on now to ask your question to the Secretary.
Hello, Secretary Cardona. After graduating from high school, I immediately started college. While in college, I had my daughter. Now, being a single parent, I had to work and go to school. Doing this took me 30 years to graduate. I know, 30 years. But I finally received my degree. Every year I had the option for forbearance. So I would choose that option, not understanding how the interest rate would affect my original loan. Now I have nearly $36,000 in student loans. It's been more than a decade since I graduated, and I'm worried that I won't ever be able to pay off these loans, because even in forbearance, interest rates continues to accrue. It's feeling like a bucket filled with water that has a hole in it. Now, my question is, will there be any financial relief for those who still have financial loans, especially those who have had them for more than 15 years and have received forbearance?
Cassandra, you bring up such an important question. First of all, congratulations to you in finishing your degree when you did. Doesn't matter when you did it, you did it. But now you do have these student loans to pay back. And Secretary Cardona, many borrowers have this question. They want to know about student loan forgiveness. You've already made some changes to the public service loan forgiveness program, but they want more. So what is your answer to Cassandra and for millions who are looking for more relief?
Thank you very much, Cassandra. Congratulations to you. What a great example for your child or children to graduate and continue their studies. As you know, public service loan forgiveness is going to be one of the major strategies that we take, especially when educators who have been serving for years routinely get turned away. We need to revamp that system and make it more user-friendly. We need to keep the borrower at the center, especially for people who choose public service. And we announced last week changes that we're making to make sure that folks who have been making payments have those payments counted toward those 10 years. So I'm hoping that you fall in the category of folks that are going to be seeing some relief there. We also know that with the American Rescue Plan, the $40 billion that is sent to higher education institutions, half of that must go toward students who are in school to help them continue in school, because we want to make sure they continue with their studies. We know the benefits there. We're going to continue conversations around loan forgiveness, broad loan forgiveness, but we also have a Build Back Better agenda that provides community college for all if passed. And I'm really hopeful that we can correct some of the issues that have happened in the past so that we don't have people swimming in debt. And we can stop the bleeding while we're also fixing the systems that are intended to help people like you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, Secretary Cardona, this brings up such an issue that is top of mind for so many Americans. And many are saying, you know, why can't we just have a certain amount of student debt canceled when borrowers are in such despair? And there are those who are saying, you know, it should be $50,000. President Biden has said $10,000. There's, you know, looking into whether or not he has the executive authority to just do this without waiting for Congress, without waiting for the time that it could take. What is your opinion on what should happen with student loan forgiveness, with canceling student debt? And do you think that the president can just do it?
You know, as I shared in the past, our conversations are ongoing with the Department of Justice and the White House on those issues. And we, you know, we are also wanting to make sure that we're doing not only the broad support for borrowers, but also stopping the bleeding. As I said before, 98% of the students that applied for public service loan forgiveness were denied. So the system needs fixing, and we're adamant that we're going to make sure that we fix the system so that it works the way Congress intended it for it to work. We've provided over $9.5 billion in loan relief since March. $9.5 billion in about 7 months is pretty significant, especially for those who are being targeted by their institutions or misled by their institutions. So every opportunity we have to support our borrowers and support those who have debt and we believe we're either taken advantage of or misled, we're going to support them, and we're going to continue those.
As you're looking at borrowers in different groups, you have done much to support students with disabilities, borrowers with disabilities, those who have been defrauded by for-profit education institutions, the military. You're looking into active duty service and with the public service loan forgiveness program. What is the next group that you're looking at? I know you're looking broadly, but are there plans to roll out loan forgiveness programs for other groups in the near future?
You know, we are revisiting is too soft a word. We're really reimagining what public service loan forgiveness needs to be. And I mean, the undersecretary he's finding his seat today. He just got approved maybe 3 weeks ago. So the pressure is on to make sure that we're doing everything we can to provide the best level of service to all of our borrowers, ensuring that we're supporting those who are serving in the public. And we're having those conversations now. We're listening to our stakeholders to make sure, you know, I recently had a conversation with borrowers who felt disenfranchised by the system. I want to hear the stories so that we can make sure that as we fix the system, we're taking into account some of the issues that it has. We're also investigating where the errors came from so that we can provide a better service at the Department of Education to the borrowers.
Absolutely. That's excellent. And we have many borrowers that you can look at our reporting, then we'll show you that have these issues and are eager to speak with you and your team about what they should be doing and what can be done next for them. So I thank you on that topic. We want to stay in Texas and go to another person who is joining us right now. Amanda Lucera is an educator from Sherryland High School. Amanda, what is your question?
Secretary Cardona, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with all of us today. So I'm a very passionate educator deep in the heart of Texas, like the very deep heart. And we have a lot of immigrant students, just like you and your family. So I did my homework on you, and you did a dissertation on closing achievement gaps. So my question for you is, how can we go about having a culturally responsive education while also closing the achievement gaps, specifically surrounding personal finance?
Secretary
Thank you very much for the Thank you very much for the question, Amanda. I was just in Texas last week. And I don't know how deep in the heart of Texas I was, but I was in Texas. And glad to have your question. Thank you for your work. You know, as you know in your research, for me, it was about making sure we have the political will to address achievement disparities boldly. And I can't think of a better time than now, when we are as close to the reset button in education as we've ever been, where we have more funds being provided for educators and education than we ever have in my 23-year career in education. This is our moment. So we must be bold. We must think about bringing our students back to a system that's better than the one in March 2020. Because as you know, the achievement outcomes for students who are Latino are not on par with others. And as long as we've been collecting data, this has been true. Dr. Noguera calls that the normalization of failure. We've almost become desensitized to that. So with regard to addressing achievement disparities, I expect that as we reopen schools, we're aggressively addressing whatever was instructional loss time that our students have had, which means maybe smaller class sizes, more one-to-one support, extended day options, good summer programming, quality programming for our students. They deserve it, and we have to make sure we're doing that. Ensuring we have social emotional supports for our students so that they can deal with the trauma that they've experienced. You know, I know we're in Hispanic Heritage Month, and I have some data that says that Latinos were 2 times more likely than white or Asians to experience loss in their families. Now those students are coming back to us. What are we doing about that? What are we doing differently? So when we talk about financial literacy planning, we have to be very intentional about it, but we also have to provide the supports to our students and families that we know that they need in order for them to successfully return. And that includes additional social workers, psychologists, better class size ratios. And then when it comes to culturally responsive pedagogy, making sure that students see themselves in their curriculum so that they can feel connected to schools. I recently visited, Amanda, yes, I recently visited a tribal college where I spoke to a student who told me he was failing. But then when he went to the tribal college, he felt seen, he felt a part of the curriculum, and he thrived there. And now he's doing community service on the college. If our students are seen, Amanda, you know this, if our students are seen, if they're seen and they're valued, they will achieve. Whether it's financial literacy, history, it doesn't matter. So with you there, Amanda, I know we're going to accomplish great things. And from my office, from my chair, you're always going to find someone that's going to advocate for better instruction, for students to be seen, and for us to be bold about addressing those disparities that have existed since we've been around as little kids ourselves.
Thank you.
Amanda's touched by this, Secretary. I don't know if you can see, but Amanda, you know, you feel seen now, right? Do you feel seen by the Secretary's answer?
Yes, ma'am. Definitely just the acknowledgement, I think, of the Hispanic community. I think a lot of times we're left out. And I think a lot of our kids feel that. And it makes me sad. So thank you.
Amanda,
I appreciate you taking the time.
Tenemos que echarle gana, como dicen en México. Tenemos que echarle gana. ¿Verdad que sí?
Yes, sir.
You know, as you're emotional about this, but with not only because of your being seen, but you're also, the Secretary's talking about a very tough issue, and that is making sure that our children have proper education and come back after the loss in terms of what they were able to learn during this pandemic. And that issue is also one that, you know, many people are concerned about as they're coming back to school, Secretary, and their children, they're worried, are they going to be safe? Texas, where Amanda is from, where Cassandra is a teacher, that school has banned, Governor Abbott has banned the mandate for vaccines for the whole state. for every entity. And so even private school students that may have thought they may be able to, private schools that would be able to have a vaccine mandate, mask mandate, that is not something that's happening right now. I'm curious, when you look at public school districts that have been struggling with this issue, like Amanda's, for some time, they want to have a mandate for vaccines. A neighboring district does not. What is your view here? Is Governor Abbott taking the wrong stance?
Yes.
What should be done?
It's appalling that we're talking about debating whether or not to protect children. We know the science. We know it spreads easier when you don't have masks. We know that. We know vaccines save lives. And if you look at the data, those places that are relaxed about the mandates, those places that are relaxed about requiring universal masking to protect children have had more children in the hospital. We can prevent this. It's unfortunate. And, I feel for educators like Amanda and others who just want to protect their students and want to protect their families too. They want to go into a work environment where they know that they're protected, but that's why elections matter. That's why elections matter. When President Biden was elected, when we talk about elevating the profession, yes, resources matter, right? And we've seen with the American Rescue Plan and Congress passed it, that matters. But protecting our educators and honoring them by saying, we're going to protect your workspace by requiring what we know works. That's so basic. So yes, I think the governor's off. And that's why our Office for Civil Rights is investigating how those actions could potentially be discriminating against students' rights to public education if they are medically vulnerable or fragile, or students with disabilities that are more likely to be hospitalized with COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to another question, Secretary, about, whether we have COVID or not, there is this shortage of teachers in this country. And I think many teachers worried about their own health may be worried about going into the classroom, even if they are masked. And so I'm wondering, when you look at statistics from, say, the Learning Policy Institute that talks about how there are more than 100,000 teachers short in this country of where we need to be, why is that? What is being done to make sure that there are an adequate number of educators? And it also points to what we're talking about in terms of personal finance education. That's seen as an extra. Sure. So you're not going to necessarily have an extra teacher to teach that. So what can be done in terms of this teacher shortage?
Yeah, those are very good questions. And let me just start off by saying, it's kind of going back to Maslow's pyramid, right? Ensuring that our teachers are safe is a starting point. So making sure as leaders, we're doing everything to honor and protect our teachers by making sure their workspace is safe. Also, making sure they're making a livable wage. We should not be having teachers working 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. If this pandemic and what we've seen, as a father myself, I know what my children's teachers do. I know how difficult it was to work from home and be able to support my high schoolers. I respect their teachers even more than I did before. And I've been an educator my whole career. So if as a country, we can't acknowledge the work that our educators do and pay them a livable wage so that they don't have to have 2 to 3 jobs, then we're missing the point here. So we also need to make sure that we have good pipeline programs. We have tremendous paraeducators, climate specialists, folks that work in schools but are not yet certified. The Build Back Better agenda provides funds to create pipeline programs so that those educators who commit to those schools already, making much less than an certified teacher, can finish their degrees and come back as a teacher. The Build Back Better agenda has specific strategies to improve the pipeline, but I think as a country, we need to do better respecting the profession and honoring our educators. And that starts by making sure that they have a livable wage. In many parts of our country, they must have more than 1 job to make ends meet. That's unacceptable.
Absolutely. I know that many teachers that are here for this virtual town hall are probably nodding their heads right now. We have one that has a question for you who is coming from California. Her name is Vanessa Collins, and she teaches world history and economics at the high school level. Vanessa, what is your question?
Secretary Cardona, I just want to thank you for being here for a subject that I'm very passionate about. I'm the daughter of immigrants from Argentina. I'm a first-generation American, And I was raised by a single mom who struggled daily to provide for me and my brother and my sister. Now I teach economics at a continuation high school. Many of my students won't go on to college. Others will go to community college. I'm here to advocate for them. They need financial literacy now. We're sending them out into the world as consumers and taxpayers, and we haven't even provided them the tools to be successful in those arenas. I live in California, where it is not mandated to teach personal finance. If we're going to diminish poverty, especially in the Latino communities, we need your help. We need it now. I'm going to continue fighting as a teacher. I even called out sick today to be here and be present so that I don't have to worry about anything else but this very important matter. We're looking up to you as the first Latino U.S. Secretary of Education, and I really need your help on this. We can go through the district level, we can go through the state level, but if we had the federal government behind us, if we had your office behind us, that would mean just so much to us, and it would make our job so much easier. I was able to diminish in poverty in my own family by being lucky and being taught about financial literacy early. I don't want my students to rely on luck. I need you now. And I would like to pose my question in Spanish out of respect for my mother that I lost this summer and out of respect for my community. ¿Cómo apoyará su oficina la expansión? Carolina Mengi.
What's your mother's name? Say it again.
Carolina Mengi. Carolina Mengi. ¿Cómo apoyará su oficina la expansión de los cursos de educación financiera a todas las escuelas públicas del país?
Pues gracias, Vanessa, y te felicito en tu éxito y también a Carolina por el esfuerzo que ella hizo para poder darte la oportunidad de realizar sus sueños. You know, like you, a lot of people that came before me sacrificed so much more so that I could be sitting here as Secretary of Education. And it's important to name them by name. So thank you for mentioning Carolina's name, and I'm sorry about your loss. You're absolutely right. We have a moment now and we have to act. And while the Department of Education does not control local curriculum or requirements. Listen, I can't even mandate masks, and we know they work. And not that I'm looking to do that, but it's really important to just preface what I'm going to say by, we have a very limited role in the Federal Department of Education. With that said, the Build Back Better agenda provides community college, like community colleges are going to rise up with this Build Back Better agenda. And we know that they have a very critical role in connecting to our high schools and to our middle schools. It's my goal, Vanessa, and we're going to accomplish it, that our middle schools, our high schools, and our community colleges connect better so that students could see the pathways, so that programs like CTE programs are better expanded. And that includes financial literacy. That has to be at the heart of it. What we're doing is elevating best practices. What we're doing is looking for state level policies that do promote financial literacy at an earlier age and lifting those up. I have conversations regularly with state chiefs. I'm going to be meeting with the state chief of California later this week. I won't tell him you called out, but what I will say is, hey, what are we doing over there for financial literacy? Because I agree with you. You know, many of our students who are first gen, like you and I are, our parents came and they sacrificed a lot, and their job was to make sure there was food on the table. It's on our generation to make sure that we're continuing to go toward a path of building wealth for our children and their children. So I'm right there with you from a personal level. And I think I do have the obligation to lift this up as an issue of importance across the country. And I will take every opportunity to do that, not only on your behalf, on Carolina's behalf, but on behalf of all of the families that know that they came to this country for a better life and that they're expecting their next generations to do better than they did. So I take it personally as well, like you do, Vanessa. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Vanessa. You know, there are many in the next generation who are looking at future generations as well. And I want to bring in Whitman Ochiai, who is studying at Cornell University. Whitman did not learn personal finance growing up in school, but he learned it on his own. And he now has his own financial literacy podcast called Money Ed. Congratulations on the podcast, Whitman. And what is your question?
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Epperson. Secretary Cardona, my interest in money started when I was young because I was lucky enough to have mentors who kind of put up with my incessant questions. I really believe that we should start teaching children about money at a young age. And why aren't we teaching young children in their math classrooms even about important money concepts like compounding, saving, and spending?
Yeah, Secretary, I love this question because I love the idea also of sneaking it into other things, sneakonomics. Can we get it into a civics class? Can we get it into even an English class? How do we bring personal finance into the curriculum?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Whitman, and for your passion about this. You know, I agree. As a young student myself, I remember learning about math concepts. I remember learning about money concepts, but it really stopped at the basic level, and it could have gone further. And I think across the country, you're going to see everyone agrees that it should be done. However, at the local level and at the state level, and I was a former commissioner of education, the challenge was, how do we get this in? How do we prioritize it to the point where it's competing with other needs that schools have to do? And as we think about coming back from this pandemic and how we're utilizing rescue plan funds, is this something that we need to prioritize more to say that in order to get out of this pandemic, we should be equipping our students with better financial planning instructions so they can make sure that we get out of whatever economic issues they might be having as well. It really requires at all levels, at the federal level, attention being placed to it, lifting up best practices, at the state level, an understanding of the importance of financial literacy instruction and the state's economy. And then at the district level, which I was a district leader as well, prioritizing this as high as anything else that's going to get you prepared for college. You and I know, Whitman, that for many of our students, you could have the best GPA, but if you can't balance your checkbook or if you can't handle your finances, what good is the degree if you're not going to be able to get out of your own debt? So absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think the time is now for us to have an approach that's local, state, and federal, where we're working in unison. And I can assure you that our OCDE office and our higher education space, this is going to be a priority. And we're going to make sure that when we're talking at the K-12 level and at the higher ed level, we're talking about financial literacy from the Department of Education. That I can guarantee you.
It's wonderful to hear it, Secretary Cardona. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitman. Now, for our final question, Secretary, I started by asking you to reflect on your high school days. Now we want to take it to high school today, to a high school senior, Brian Flores, who's 17 years old. He has a question for you now coming from California. Brian?
Thank you, Secretary Cardona, for being here today. My parents are both from Mexico, and like you, I didn't learn to speak English until I was in kindergarten. The question I have for you today is, how can students who have parents who don't speak English or a personal finance course requirement teach themselves so they're financially literate?
Bueno, gracias, Brian, por la pregunta. And, I know many students like you now. And I work with those students and I have conversation about how they can get ahead. And I can tell you, schools who serve students whose families are monolingual Spanish speakers must make resources available to those Spanish in a language they understand. We all benefit from that, right? So it's really important that those students find folks in their schools that can provide information to their families. I've been a part of organizing family literacy nights with bank representatives that speak Spanish for families. And you do it in a culturally responsive way, right? In a way where your parents might feel more comfortable going to learn about the basics of college savings or different accounts that you could set up to set students up for saving. But I would argue that you don't do it when the kids are in high school. You do it when the kids are in kindergarten. And you say, for them to go to college, these are some things you want to do. But I will say also that, those local community centers that might support families that are not native English speakers, we need to make sure that they're connected to the high schools so that we work together as a community to support all of our families, including our families who have gotten here either from a Spanish-speaking country or from a different country, so that their children have access to the same opportunities that you and I had access to when we came here. So I thank you for that question, and know that part of this work for financial literacy, competence building, is also ensuring that we're doing it in a way that's responsive to the families we serve. And if those families are still in the process of learning English, we have to make sure that they get the information in a language they're comfortable with.
Yes, you are very responsive to very many families across the spectrum. And Secretary Cardona, we thank you so much for being here today, for joining us for this virtual town hall, and for answering so many questions from people who really are concerned about the state of financial education, the state of their college financing and their borrowing, and the state of education in the middle still of this pandemic. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.